Hi there and welcome to the channel and to this my Valentine's Day book haul. That's right, incurable romantic as the disappointed man is, I took my wife on a tour of the city's used bookstores, finishing up at the University Library by way of a Valentine's Day celebration. In fairness to myself, when we returned home, chocolate cake was provided. I hope and trust you had a wonderful Valentine's Day too, no matter what you were doing. And before I get into this book haul, there are two items of channel news. Firstly, a major donation to the channel. So I wish to thank Clutterbuck, and I would urge others of you watching to follow suit, dip into your pocket and funnel some funds in the direction of my good self. And secondly, I wish to send a shout out to Hafsa from Pakistan, who sent me an email saying how much he likes the channel. If anyone else just wants to communicate with me and tell me which part of the world they hail from, that is always fascinating to know. Okay, I believe we're now ready to start on this rather large pile of books beside me, so without further ado, let's begin. And first we have two books by an old friend of the channel. It is M.R. James, the purveyor of ghost stories, an inventor indeed of the antiquarian ghost story. I reviewed him reviews 5, his collected ghost stories. Now, most of that is in here in truth, but there are a few others that I was not aware of, and there are some bits and pieces and some wonderful introductions too. So picking these up for a few pennies was excellent, and I highly recommend his work. Next, the Victorian era, and it is not Dickens but Mayhew's London, which is rather like Sketches by Boz by Dickens, his early work, and it's just journalistic accounts of life in London. And it was published originally in 2 large volumes, and this is a condensed version edited by the great Peter Quennell. There's no index, sadly, but Victorian scholars will have copies of this on their desk, and I'll just read you a little passage where he interviews a rat catcher, a young boy called Jack Black. Great name. Okay, so Mr. Black informed me that the big iron wire cage in which the sparrows were fluttering about had been constructed by him for rats, and that it held over 1,000 when full. For rats are packed like cups, he said, one over the other. But, he added, business is bad for rats, and it makes a splendid havery. Besides, sparrows is the rats of birds, sir, for if you look at 'em in a cage, they always huddles up in a corner like rats in a pit, and they are almost vermin in colour and habits, and eats anything. Okay, so any page really you can dip into in here and find something wonderful or frightening, as the case may be, from Victorian London. Moving on, sci-fi, and it is Jules Verne with his The Castle in the Carpathians, and yes, this is in French. It's a very cute little French edition here. And I've been looking at it, and yes, I'll be able to read it basically and further improve my French. And the reason I'm flicking through is because it's full of reproductions of the original illustrations, which are quite fascinating in their own right. Then biography, and it's this Kafka biography that's falling apart. The Nightmare of Reason, and the lettering, which is often used with Kafka, is actually the kind of lettering you find with Oskar Kokoschka's graphic design. Here's Kokoschka. Here's this one. Right? See the similarity? Yeah. Okay, so who's this one? By Ernest Pawel. And it does have a few photos, but I noticed that the photos are not on photographic paper. They're just on regular paper, so that's slightly disappointing. Then an Austrian writer, and it is Robert Musil. I've yet to read any of his work. Many people have recommended his Young Taurus to me as being particularly good and likely to interest me. So here we have Posthumous Papers of a Living Author, and then his masterpiece. It is The Man Without Qualities in these rather nice, what are they, modern library editions, I believe. And I've got both of them here, so I'm really looking forward to reading these this year. If you've already read them, tell me which one is better, 1 or 2. I'd like to know. Then I'm writing from Latin America. It is Joaquin Maria by Machado de Assis, and it says Machado's masterpiece, and that is from the New York Times Book Review. Yes, I don't actually know much about this. I've read the first few pages, and yes, it was kind of fascinating the way it's narrated, so looking forward to getting into that. Then some French writing, and it is Last Year at Marienbad. And this is a text by Alain Robbe-Grillet, and it's for the film by Alain Resnais. Okay, an evergreen book. These are usually quite good. And this has got over 140 illustrations from the movie, which I know absolutely nothing about, but this was pennies, so I picked it up. Then some writing from the Middle East. I've been trying to find more writing from this part of the world, and so I picked up this one. I have to say, I don't really like the artwork. I thought it was a children's book at first, actually, on the basis of that illustration. And it is The Return to Beirut by Andree, Chedid, and there is a picture of her, I believe. Oh yes, here she is at the back. And it says she's a poet, dramatist, and novelist, born and educated in Cairo. Okay, so I did start reading this, and after about 30 pages or so, I became rather disappointed in what I was reading, because it just seemed to be drawn straight from life without any real art. Yes, and I don't think that's enough. I know that it can be interesting to preserve memories of a particular place and time, but you have to do something with them. Otherwise, it really is like listening to someone retelling their dreams. It's not particularly interesting, sadly. Then Thomas Wolfe. Oh no, sorry, not Thomas Wolfe, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Thomas Wolfe is later with his Blithedale Romance. I know absolutely nothing about this, but what I do know is Nathaniel Hawthorne is a superb writer. And the moment I picked it up and began reading the first few pages in the bookstore, I was kind of hooked. Let me just read you this. Okay, so the evening before my departure for Blithedale, I was returning to my bachelor apartments. Oh, we're already in that great era of the past, aren't we? When people had their bachelor apartments instead of their bedsits. After attending the wonderful exhibition of The Veiled Lady, when an elderly man of rather shabby appearance met me in an obscure part of the street. "Mr. Coverdale," said he softly, "can I speak with you a moment?" As I have casually alluded to The Veiled Lady, it may not be amiss to mention, for the benefit of such of my readers as are unacquainted with her now forgotten celebrity, that she was a phenomenon in the mesmeric line. Wow, I just want to keep reading. Right? Mesmerism, that is very interesting. It sets us back in the kind of the time of Edgar Allan Poe. He has a lot about mesmerism in his stories. Then, going further back, the Elizabethan world picture. My wife pointed out that there are no pictures in here. Oh, very funny. But what it does is it takes you through some key kind of beliefs underpinning many literary texts of the period. And I'll just read you the contents, not something from the book itself, but the links in the chain. So it's got this section on the chain of being, which is great. It's got angels and ether, the stars and fortune, the elements, man, animals, plants and metals. And he shows you how the great chain of being operates in various passages of Shakespeare's plays. So there are lots and lots of quotations in here from Milton, from Spenser, from the Bard, and it's very slim and very elegantly written by some Oxbridge Don there. Who is it? E.M.W. Tillyard. What a great name that is. I believe a tillyard is where people used to have jousts, isn't it? Like a tilt yard. Next, poetry, and it is William Butler Yeats, the great Irish poet. And I remember my friend telling me a very amusing anecdote about Yeats on our way on the train from Dublin to the Martello Tower that features at the beginning of Ulysses, of course. And he said Yeats was rather high class, an aristocrat, and he was on the train and looking out at the view, and he said in his grand fashion, one would give £100 to gaze upon such a view for an hour. And a friend of Yeats stood up, pulled the communication cord to stop the train, and said, it will only cost you 10. That's a very, very good anecdote. I'm a big fan of his poetry. I won't read any right now. Oh, I flipped it open at a poem called The Tower. A rather spooky coincidence there. I presume it's not about the Martello Tower, seeing as its subheading there is Sailing to Byzantium. No. That rather reminds me of, is it King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard? Oh, no, sorry, She. Yes. Which has one of my favourite last lines of an opening chapter. Oh, it's not Byzantium, but it's got a great line here at the end of chapter 3. That day, 3 months, we were on the ocean, bound for Zanzibar. Yeah, difficult to top. Great novel, She, by H. Rider Haggard. Sincerely recommended. Wow. Great black and white movie of that too. Moving on. Well, I've already mentioned Poe, and here he is in French. Nouvelle Histoire Extraordinaire, and it has an introduction by the literary theorist Svetsvan Todorov. Yes, whose books I really did enjoy. He's sort of associated with structuralism. Okay, great cover there. Next up, more writing from the Middle East, and it is this one, Rafik Shami with his Damascus Nights. And I like the colour. Yeah, very colourful jacket there. But I don't like the actual format of this book. The boards are incredibly thick. It's published by Farrar, Straus Giroux. Here's a picture of Rafik there. And yes, the boards are too thick, and then the pages are too narrow. And when you read the book, the text is pushed right up to the edges of the page. Everything about this is wrong. And there's this kind of magenta ribbon that I also don't like. Yes. So the text itself is the only good thing really about this book. And I read a little in the bookstore, and unlike the writing about Beirut, here we do have some art. It reminded me a little of Italo Calvino's Marco Valdo. It has a very warm feeling. It's full of sentiment. Then I just mentioned Calvino. Here he is. The Castle of Crossed Destinies. For any hippies out there, any New Age people, this is based on the tarot. So rather unusually, you get a book full of tarot readings, which are then used to structure the narrative. And it's about a bunch of travelers who take refuge inside a chateau, I believe, or a religious institution, to shelter from some floods. So it's rather like the Decameron. It's conceit, and then you have these stories being spun, and the lives of the people intersect in various ways. Here, the tales of seeking and losing. What's next? I also tried to tell my tale. So it's very postmodern. Yeah, so it might interest some of you out there. Sorry, I do need a drink. Once again, I'm coming to you in association with green tea. Now then, next, some German writing. 2 more slim novels by Günter Grass, and this one is Headbirds, or The Germans Are Dying Out. Rather disturbing artwork there. I did read another one of these short ones, Cat and Mouse, that was well written, but left me cold rather. But I'll give this a try too, just because they're so short. And this one is set in the summer of 1980. And then I have another one of them here. The Meeting at Taugte. And this one is not set in 1980. The year is 1647, and the 30 Years' War is drawing to a close. Yes, 1618 to 1648. Any international relations scholars will know it's a key date, because the resolution of the war was the Treaty of Westphalia, which kind of brought peace to Europe for a considerable period of time. Okay. Then the trilogy, or 3 novels rather, by Beckett, and it is Malloy, Malone Dies, and the Unnameable. And I have to admit, I have read this numerous times, starting back when I was at university in the 90s. And what I'm going to confess is that Malloy is my favourite of these 3 novels. This is a very nice edition, actually. Who's it published by? Grove Press. Yes, lots of great books from them. Then more French literature. It's The Erasers by Alain Robbe-Grillet, and he's just a very good writer of the Nouveau Roman. And I have his notes on the Nouveau Roman as well, which is really down to earth. I did mention it in a previous video. Just great attitude he has. This one's got Chinese notes, so someone's engaged with that. I'll get my wife to translate what they've remarked upon there. Okay. Moving on. Oh, a great American writer, Thomas Wolfe. And it's his Look Homeward, Angel. I remember driving past his family home in Asheville, North Carolina. What a beautiful, beautiful part of the world that is. And Thomas Wolfe is a beautiful writer. Famously, he used to hand in his manuscripts and they would measure how thick they were. And I think one of his books, it was like a yard from the floor to the top. Yes, prolific prolific writer and a great writer too. I think there's another short one by him in the pile somewhere also. Let's make sure those don't fall down. Then, more of a resource for me. It's the Penguin Book of World Folk Tales. I love these kinds of anthologies. I bought one last month of Native American legends, and that is excellent. Here, what do we have here? The Sorcerer of the White Lotus Lodge. That might be from the Far East. Here, Nasreddin Hodja in the Pulpit. Where are we here? The Fifth Voyage of Sinbad the Seaman. And there are these charming illustrations in this book too. It's quite a thick volume. We're looking at close to, 700 pages. So I very much look forward to reading that. Then German Romanticism, it's Goethe, The Sorrows of Young Werther, and Novella. And I do have this, Penguin Classics, but I picked this one up because it has a foreword by W.H. Auden, and the poems are translated by Auden. So thought I would take that. Then more Thomas Wolfe. Yes, I did just preview this, didn't I? It's The Hills Beyond, one of his shorter works. Might fit that in this month if I have time. Next, a biography, a monster. It is Richard Ellmann's biography of Joyce. Ellmann also famously wrote a huge biography of Oscar Wilde, which I also have here in hardback. This is a very nice softback of Joyce's life. I haven't read much Joyce in truth, apart from The Dubliners and Portrait of the Artist, but I did go and see his notebooks in the library at Trinity College in Dublin. They have a museum there, and you can see these very humble exercise books, and just inside is the text of Ulysses. They also had lots of first editions by Samuel Beckett, and the amazing Book of Kells is on display there too. Excellent place to go, and the long room of that library is all wood, and when the sun shines through, it's like nowhere else on earth. An amazing, amazing place. Trinity College, Dublin. Okay. Some history. It's the Marxist historian Eric Hobsbawm with The Age of Empire. He also wrote The Age of Revolution. There's 3 in this series. I can't remember the other one. But my favourite book by Hobsbawm, maybe I do have a copy here, is his Bandits. It's a history of banditry. That is really satisfying. Oh, this has some photos also. There we go. So if it's The Age of Empire, it's 1875 to 1914. That's right. The Age of Revolution centres on 1848, of course. Okay. Another biography. This one, Harvard Press, and it is of Turgenev, His Life and Times by Leonard Shapiro, one of my favourite writers. A review of First Love is imminent, and I'm going to finish his Fathers and Sons as well. And as coincidence would have it, the chapter I've just cracked open is Fathers and Children. Okay, he is a great, great Russian writer. Right. A few more books to go and we'll be done. So these are from the library, and it's some more novels by Andree Gide, and this one is his perhaps most famous after The Immoralist. It is The Counterfeiters, and this comes highly recommended by some of the channel's viewers. And then we have, yes, The Immoralist by Gide. So for anyone who's missed it, my last review was Straight is the Gate by Andree Gide, which I heartily recommend. Oh, another Gide novel, but this one is my own. I picked that up in the used bookstore. It is The Vatican Cellars in a very charming Penguin edition. I love these. Right, I've read the first few chapters of this, and it's really excellent, about a man and his wife who go to Rome, and he's doing these scientific experiments where he's starving mice to see how long they can go without food, and he's writing in his data each day, and then he realizes that the mice are growing fatter, and then he discovers that his wife has taken pity on these poor mice and has been secretly feeding them, and he's absolutely furious and changes the locks on his laboratory. But that was most amusing. Next we have William Golding's The Double Tongue, left unfinished at the time of his death and seen through its publication by Faber and Faber's editors and his good wife. And I do really love the writing of William Golding. His book The Inheritors, which he won the Nobel Prize for, is about early man, and that was superb. It took you inside the mind of basically a caveman. Strongly recommended. I have his Lord of the Flies, of course. Then some more from the library, and it is Knut Hamsun. Now I know my Knut Hamsun video that I uploaded has hardly set BookTube alight, but never mind, I'm still going to make videos on the rest of his works that I can find because I just enjoy them so much, so please indulge me. And this one is The Last Joy, which is the final installment of the Wanderer trilogy. A horrible, horrible format. I would never buy a book like this myself. Why would you need a book this small? Is it for people with very small hands? I'm not really sure of the logic there. Then Hamsun's Dreamers, which is superb. I've already read this. It's one of my favourite short novels. It's only 113 pages and it's in very large type, so you don't need the reading glasses. This is Pure Enchantment. And another Hamsun, Mysteries. Okay, this one's a little thicker. Moving on, this is from the library. This is for, well, research purposes, and it is The Library of Greek Mythology by Apollodorus. And so I read in here the myth of the Danaides. These were 50 sisters who lived in ancient Egypt, and they were fated to marry their 50 cousins. Horrified at the prospect, their father sailed away with them to Argos, their ancestral homeland, where they sought religious sanctuary. However, the cousins pursued them there, and the father eventually capitulated. However, he instructed his daughters on their wedding night to stab to death their husbands. 49 of the 50 complied. One refrained from doing so, thereby incurring the wrath of their father. And when the sisters died, they were punished in the underworld by having to carry water for eternity and try to fill a large vase with a hole in the bottom, very much in the manner of Sisyphus pushing his rock up the hill, or Ixion on his wheel. And so this book by Apollodorus is one of the best resources for information on the Greek myths, along with Ovid's Metamorphoses. Okay, then we have more on Ovid, and we have his Fasti, which goes through the calendar and picks up on all the festivals, and it is in verse, this translation. Then one more, and this one is superb. I want to buy this myself. If I ever get any more donations, I'll pick it up online. It is Jonathan Bate, one of my heroes and my favourite Shakespearean scholar, with his Ovid and Shakespeare. Ovid and Shakespeare. I've read the first few chapters, and he's just a brilliant writer, and he seems to just know everything. He's a great scholar, and it's just full of interesting information on the profound influence of Ovid on the bard. Then some Eastern tales, but written by a Belgian. It's Marguerite Yourcenar with her Oriental tales, and these are superb. She did spend time, I believe, in the Far East, and she wrote a book on Yukio Mishima, the great Japanese writer. And the first one in here, How Wang Fo Was Saved, is superb. I read it with my students in class, and it's got just a beautiful, beautiful ending that I won't spoil, but these are excellent. I've got some more of her books in here too. Then Polybius's histories, and these are to complement Livy, because Polybius's histories fill in some of the gaps we have in Livy. Because with Livy, you miss the First Punic War, you just jump to the second one with Hannibal, and I believe this does feature some stuff about that. Almost done. And more French writing now, and it is Genet. Now, I've mentioned many times on the channel that I adore the writing of Genet. There's just no one else like him. And this is a selection made by the great Edmund White, and it's of his plays, his journalism, his novels, and just going through this, you just realize the extraordinary imagination of this man. And I'm going to pick up on some of this in one of my videos this month. But this memoir, Prisoner of Love, Letter to Sartre, The Penal Colony, Comments on the Cinema, the studio of Alberto Giacometti, because Genet made the acquaintance of Giacometti and wrote a book about him that Giacometti just said he was absolutely floored by. Thought it was one of the most magnificent statements on art he'd ever read. I do have it here somewhere. Where is it? Here it is. Jean Genet, Atelier de Alberto Giacometti. Atelier means studio. And what's great about this book is it has many photos from inside his studio and some of Giacometti's sketches as well. I'm not absolutely positive this is available in English, but it really is worth having. There's a picture of the man at work. Okay, moving on. Now, the last two books are also in French, and they are by that Belgian writer again, first female to be elected to the Académie Française, a true genius. It is Marguerite Yourcenar, and there are these folio editions. So first we have this one, Le Song et le Sort, and then this slightly thicker one, Souvenir Pieux. So something memories, I'm not absolutely sure what it is. But this one I realise I'll be able to read. It's autobiographical. And I like this first line. You know, so many people have written their lives, and yet you can always find a new angle. And here, the first line is, the being that I call myself came into the world on a certain Monday, 8th of June, 1903, towards 8 o'clock in the morning at Brussels. Okay, so yeah, the being that I call myself. Okay, so I never quite saw that formulation, despite having read many, many pieces of life writing. So there you have it. That concludes this Valentine's Day book haul. I hope you enjoyed it. Any comments on the books there that you've read, the books you'd like to read, please leave them below. But now I must bid you farewell in the time-honoured fashion. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.